Hello, my name is Rico Villanueva from Langham Publishing.
Dr. Rico Villanueva, good to see you. Welcome, Rico. Glad to see you here at our place here in Houston.
Thank you. Thank you, David.
Yeah, it's nice to have you. So for those who are out there thinking about studying Greek or Hebrew, in your case, how did you get started reading Hebrew?
I started my exposure to Hebrew formally in the seminary when I did my MDiv in Manila. So I did a 2 to 3 years study of Hebrew, 2 sem each. So I think I finished Hebrew 1 to 4, and I'm glad I did. I have a friend, he did a study of Greek, or I think Hebrew as well. And he told me, you don't need Hebrew and Greek because when you look at the English translation, the literal ones, it's exactly the same, he said. I'm glad I didn't listen to him. You begin to appreciate, the Bible itself, because when you look at the original, So I'm glad I didn't listen to my friend.
Yeah.
And I think he lost a lot of things when he didn't read. Study.
And that's part of what this podcast is about, is showing people that there's really a payoff. There's some benefits to seeing connections in the text, the Hebrew, in your case, the Hebrew text, that you couldn't see otherwise. So today we're looking at Psalm 1, which is, one of my favorite psalms. It's often referred to as a wisdom psalm because there's a sense in which there's two paths. One path is the way of righteousness, the other path is the way of wickedness.
Yeah.
And they both end in different places, right?
Right.
The way of the wicked, boy, it's not going to go well. The way of the righteous, it will go well. So it's a wonderful, beautiful psalm. What is the features that you want us to see here today?
Yeah, so you mentioned that it's a wisdom psalm. It's also called Torah psalm because of the focus on the law. And one of the things that helps us when we learn Psalm 1 in the original is to notice the beginning and the end. The very first word in Psalm 1 is Ashrei. It begins with the letter A. That's the Aleph.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the very last word is Tobed, which begins with a Tau. You actually have here Aleph, A, and then Z.
So A to Z.
A to Z. And there's a saying about the law that you have to obey it from Aleph to Tav, from A to Z. So you really see the beauty of this psalm, how the composer, not just in the contents, but in the very form, the beginning with A to Tav, or A to Z.
We might say in America A to Z.
A to Z, yeah.
A to Z.
Well, in Britain,
Other places it's Z.
They corrected me, but A to Z. Okay, where am I? Anyway, A to Z.
A to Z.
It is in its wholeness, and you appreciate that in Hebrew when you look at it. So it's about the command. It's about the law, and then at the very first verse and the second one, it says, "Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach ba'adshat reshaim." Of derech chataim lo amad, of moshav leitshim lo yashab. There is one word that I'd like us to focus on, and that's the word lo, which is not. Often in English translation, it's not repeated, but 3 times in these 2 verses. Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor in the way of the sin. In English, we don't repeat the not, but actually in Hebrew, and in the way of sinners, he does not stand.
Right.
And in the seat of the mockers, he does not sit.
Does not.
You see, it reminds you of the
emphasis there.
Yeah, the 10 Commandments, thou shall not. The thrice repeated word is for emphasis. That you're dealing here with the way of the righteous,
Yeah.
the way of and you need to be careful, Okay.
And it begins with the way that it is not, right? It is not this, it is not this, it is not this. And in part because that's so common, right? The counsel of the wicked, the way of sinners, the seat of scoffers. That is just so common in our world today. But that's not the way of the righteous, is it?
Yep.
And I like that emphasis upon
not. Because in these verses as well, David, we are shown the progression of evil. At first, walking, the image, and then standing, and then sitting.
Right.
It's like, in the Philippines, you have this drinking spree. When you walk, they would invite you, come, have a drink. These are drunkards,
Yeah.
And so at first you're walking, and then second, you're standing with them. And before you know it, you're already sitting with them.
Sitting down. And to sit down at a table, to have a meal, that's a form of intimacy, right?
Fellowship already. You're already one. So you should not, be careful of this way of the righteous.
Yeah.
The emphasis there, the warning already at the very beginning. But you don't appreciate that in an English translation because you tend to read in a hurry,
Yeah. One of the things that I love about Greek and Hebrew is that they cause you to slow down. We can't read them at the same pace as we do our English, right?
Yes.
We have to think about, what's the case of that? What's the form of that? Is that a PA? Is that a pual? What is it exactly? You've got to think about that. You've got to hear it, and then you've got to think about, now what's the implications of that? It takes a little longer for us to come to those conclusions.
Exactly. And in a fast-paced culture, especially when you go to the spirituality of the Word of God, you need to slow down. For example, you notice about what's this verb, pull up, the word, for example, when the psalmist compared the righteous, he compared it with a tree, like a tree planted. And in Hebrew, shatul is a passive voice.
Which somebody else has planted.
Which means that being still before the Lord. It's being acted upon, Sometimes we like to be in control all the time, but actually spirituality is about sitting in stillness, in the presence of the Lord and allowing Him to work in our lives. He compares the righteous with like a tree, and in Hebrew, that's the word ka'etz, and then later he compares the wicked with the chaff.
Chaff, yeah.
In Hebrew, that's kamotz. Notice the sound at the end.
Yeah.
Ka'etz, kamotz, ka'etz, tree.
Right.
Kamotz. They sound similar because the writer wants you to notice. And these are things that are lost in translation, the sound.
Sound
in Hebrew as well.
Yeah.
So they are similar in sound because they want you to look at it. But they are a universe in difference because the righteous is founded, ka'etz,
like a tree.
Planted, but the wicked is like the chaff. Now you see them, now you don't.
Right.
And one of the marks
blows away.
One of the marks of the righteous is being established,
And prospering, going on to prosper.
Yes.
And the other sort of comes to nothing. The way of the wicked perishes. That's a great reading of this passage.
Thank you.
Rico, thanks for being with us today on Exegetically Speaking.
My pleasure.
I just love to hear the Psalms read in Hebrew and read well. Rico will be back with us. I'm going to make sure of that. You can learn to read Hebrew as well as Dr. Frederico Villanueva. Here's how. In the show notes, find the link to Modern and Classical Languages at Wheaton College. Click on that, and it will take you to a world of enchantment and delight. No, not Disneyland. To Wheaton, Illinois. It is work, but it's also fun. Thanks to Kathy Capes for editing this podcast. Thanks to John Lonsma, Jesse Dukin, and Rebecca Larson for their help in producing and promoting this podcast. If you like this podcast, and who doesn't, give us a 5-star rating and tell some friends. Until next time, I'm David Capes. Thanks for listening.